African father in America. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. African father in America. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze.
You are listening to African Father in America podcast by Simon Javanokelo, live from Seattle, Washington, USA.
Beautiful people, this is another beautiful Friday here in Seattle, Washington, and I'm really happy to be here with you, for another episode of the African Father in America podcast, where I will not be interviewing anybody and I will not be, narrating any story, but I will be interviewed. I'll just be sharing my story, and, there's no better way for such a thing to happen than for my dear Vivian Philips, who I truly look up to, not just as a mother, but as a sister, as a friend, as someone who influences me, not just intellectually or artistically, but even in terms of fashion, even if you look at how you're dressed now, it's just great. So with that, I just want to say that, Vivian Philips is a leader. And, I connected with Vivian Philips when Madaraka Festival was still happening here in Seattle, Washington. At that time, she was the director of communications for Seattle Theatre Group. And with that, I just want to pass it on to her so that she can, share with you more about her and how we ended up having today's conversation where she's interviewing me. And then we're just going to navigate a lot of topics that she prepared. And then at the end, I'll do the outro. So thank you again for subscribing to the African Father in America podcast on iTunes and on YouTube. And please, Vivian Philips.
Well, Simon, I'm so honored and delighted to have this opportunity to chat with you and to introduce myself to your audience, for all those folks out there who are listening and do listen to an African Father in America. My connection with Simon Okelo is one that goes probably deeper than we know. I think we probably connected in some sort of spiritual realm, because I do believe in spiritual connections and the energetic connections that we share with one another. And I think that we probably connected that way long before we met in the physical realm.
Right.
But connecting with you and the Madaraka Festival was a life changer for me, because I certainly have a love for African art and culture, and it's my heritage as well. And in my fortunate life, having the ability to visit even your home of Kenya, having that music and that art and the connection and the sense of community that all came with Madaraka Festival here in Seattle was, like I said, life-changing. So today I get to interrogate, if you will, the next little bit of time, your experience as an African father in America, which is a subject that I'm very interested in. And I'm just looking forward to having a little bit of conversation with you. And I think that you're such a humble person, that you probably don't spend much time sharing much of your life with your audience. So I want to start today by asking that you share a little bit about your background, your origins. We know that you are from Kenya. You are from Kisumu. And talk a little bit about what life was like for you growing up in Kisumu.
Thank you. This is great. When I was like 8 years old, my mother was a business lady. She started that business by selling grocery along the street. Imagine maybe a sack of beans, a sack of green grams, a sack of fingerlings, tiny fish,
Yes.
Then she would lay them on the side of the road on mats, and then she hired relatives, my uncles, my cousins would be hawkers, people that sell the same things to her in the community, because we lived in the slum. All the products that were bought from, let's say, KUOW would then be subdivided into smaller quantities to serve different families.
Yes.
And so, she grew that business into the main distributor of milk and bread in the whole city. But it started on the street. And I saw all of this. I was growing up in that business. Sometime I would be helping with selling. But what I remember vividly is when I was 8 years old, I was given a bicycle, and I owned this bicycle for years, for maybe 7 or so years. And, this bicycle was for me to distribute milk and bread in our community. Because you had to work to live in my mom's household, She was...
Well, I love her. You got to work to eat.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So every day I woke up at 2 a.m. in the morning, and I used this bicycle to, milk and bread were dropped off at our place. And sometime we would go to downtown Kisumu. So that is maybe at 11 p.m. People are going to bed, but I would ride that bicycle. These are the days of droughts. In Kenya we have days when milk is available in plenty. Those are the rainy days, when there were good rains. But when it's dry season, or sometime when there is like 2 years of drought, milk becomes scarce because cows are not getting enough grass. So we used to stay overnight at the depot where milk would be dropped, and then distributors like my mom would go and pick it up and then distribute it in the various small areas within the city. So imagine if it was Seattle, and my mom was the distributor for the central district, but the milk for the entire Seattle area, West Seattle, all over the place was dropped at CenturyLink Field.
Gotcha.
So my mom would be one of the people that pick it up there, then say, everybody in the CD.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So my CD was my area.
Yes, got it.
And I had my bicycle, and I had to supply every shopkeeper. So within the CD, there were smaller shopkeepers that you would give like 1 crate of milk, then they sell it. Then an hour later, I would go back and pick up the money, So I did that every day, and I learned relations with people in the community, relations with leaders, because business people are leaders too. You know. And as I was growing up, I grew up with responsibility, but I was also growing up with 2 brothers above me. So I was not the oldest brother. So my father was a polygamist, and my oldest brother was from the first wife's family.
All right, so just a couple of things I want to, just so we can expand just a little bit on this. First of all, the way that you describe the way in which your mother did business would be like thinking of her as the chief distributor, like the Costco person, if you will, right? Okay. And so that commerce, that sense of commerce was something that you learned growing up, and business and developing relationships is what you're saying.
Right.
So you built your business through building relationships.
Right.
Got it.
Right.
But now, the Kenyan society is a polygamous society, right? The social structure is a polygamous environment, which means that your dad had multiple wives.
Right. My dad had 2. I have an uncle who has 6, I even had uncles and people like that who had more.
Okay. So how many siblings did you have altogether?
Probably 30.
30 siblings.
Yeah, because the older wife, there is speculation that she had 20 to 22,
Wow.
Yeah, people gave birth a lot, just like in the African American communities a few years ago,
Interesting.
So
you had the two older brothers that you were most connected to, and then you had younger sisters, right?
Yes. So my mom gave birth to a lot of girls, So, and I have brothers too. I had an older brother who passed away as a result of being involved in gang activities and alcoholism and drug abuse. Same to my brother from, the first wife's family. So I found myself being the elderly male in the family because my dad was absent most of the time because he spent most of the time with the older wife,
I see.
in the rural area. But my mom had left the rural area. She came and settled in the slum, in the city. And so in that environment, which was very rough, my mom took our family to a level where we were respected because of her entrepreneurial efforts and her sternness. Then my brother took it from there and made our family known as that gangster's family,
So what you're saying is you had a built-in protection environment. Yeah. You were protected in many ways. Now, the other things that your mom did, in addition to being a distributor of goods, though, is did she not also build an addition onto your home so that she could have rooms to rent?
Yes, yes. And that is what turned into the orphanage home that we had from 1997 to 2013. And now it's where One Vibe is running our education, music and art programs.
Wow.
Yeah, so, the compound where I was raised, it's almost like your compound, where your house is. And so imagine, for 1 decade, that compound is a place where you built small houses with temporary building materials and rented it out to people. So I had a little room there. Ugura Runga had a little room. Maybe Aaron had a room there. Maybe Yirim had a room there. So you're a landlady, Then the AIDS pandemic happens, and our community is ravaged by it. So, every Sunday after church, people meet in that compound. And so children are given food there. Then the children feel like, oh, this is where we are being fed. So they start spending nights. And before we know it, this is an orphanage,
Simon, this just hearing this story makes everything kind of fall into place and helps me to really get a better view of where your personality comes from. You come from an environment that, obviously you describe it as a slum, but it is and was an environment that was loving and communal and caring. And that's really pretty much what I see you doing. You continue to do that.
Yes. It was, there's a reggae song that says, Ghetto is a college, where we learn all our knowledge. And if you live in an environment like that, it's like you have a PhD of life,
Yeah, right. You know how to navigate all kinds of different things that you can't learn in school. But now thinking about school too. I think, were you like 13 years old when you ended up going to private school?
Yes. So around that time, I used to go to public school for a long time, and again, my mom used to incentivize everything that she does for you. So when I was doing well with my distribution of milk and bread, the commission she could have been paying me is what she used to take me to a better school, Then after being in a better school, a private school for a while, then she took me to even another private school. But it was all based on the incentive from how I was doing with my distribution,
Wow.
So as I was going to school, I was also stuck with my business, So then, after graduating from primary school, I went to Maranda High School, which was a really good national high school, one of the top 5 in Kenya. But it was a boarding school, and I grew up in the slum, where I was used to doing business and engaging with people. So when I went to this high school, I just started doing similar things, but some of those things were not allowed there, So I felt so restricted that after being there for 2 years, I left and went to a day school where I could be home and go to school, be home and go to school.
I see.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I also learned about you is that you earned a scholarship to college.
Right.
Via boxing. Now, you got to help me make the connection
How
between.
How did you learn about this?
That's what I do. I'm nosy. So you tell me a little bit, or tell us more about the connection between, the business that you ran, the incentives, and the just do it yourself kind of way that you and your mom and your family embraced, and then how did you end up going into boxing? Where did boxing come from?
Well, like I was saying, because my brother was very violent when he did things in the community, because he would go beat up people, rob, do a lot of criminal things. He got into a lot of problems, and his life was shortened because of the violence he was involved in. His body was being armed. He was arming people. He was a big guy. If he lived in America, he would have been a footballer, American football, He was a handsome guy, strong, and as we grew up, he was respected in the community, but I think he lacked a support system. When you are a young man, you think you can conquer the world, but if you don't have other father figures around that can, that you can look up to, or that you can have certain conversations with, then you find it in gangs. You might find it, some people find it in church, some people find it in various ways, but for him, it was gang and alcoholism and just other things that, we lived with him in one room, and sometime I would be helping him nurse a wound from stabbing. Sometime, we did some crazy things with him. I got involved to a certain extent, but during the day I was helping my mom. At night, sometime I would be forced to be involved with some of his things. So I was like living a double life,
Interesting.
And it was very normal, such things are normal in the slum, But then I started realizing how powerful the work my mom was doing is after I started seeing the kids that were living with us. But also, my sisters, are very beautiful, and one of them was gang raped, and that is, part of what led me to want to go to learn about boxing.
I see.
At the same time, there was another incident where, a girl also from our compound had gone to the store to buy things, and, was also robbed of the things she was going to get. When we went to recover these things, we were beaten up. We were not physically fit. My brother was physically fit, and he could stab you, he could beat you with a piece of metal. But for me, I didn't want to kill somebody, For him, he could beat you almost to death, because he was known for that, but for me, I just wanted to be able to protect myself, protect my people, and keep just get to a place where that you don't screw with this guy,
I got it. Self-defense. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
So when I was protecting this girl, there was a boxing coach that saw what I was doing. And he was like, "Are you a boxer?" Then I said, "No." And then he said, "You should come to the gym, So, he took me and he left me at the window, and, he was in the gym. They were working out, boxing gym, one of 2 gyms in my hometown. And it was run by Kenya Railways Corporation, the organization that owns and runs the railway lines. So, it produced a lot of well-known boxers in Kenya,
I gotcha. Yeah.
So many of these boxers came from the slum,
Yeah.
So once I saw the gym the first time and I saw how these people are working out,
there's your protector.
I see. Yeah. We'll keep going. I think someone is at the door, something like that. But once we got to the place where I felt like the people who are coming to this gym outside in the community, they were also respected. That's what I learned, and so I wanted to be around them, and when I went to high school, I started going to that gym even more regularly. So every day after school, I would be allowed to go to the gym. And I realized in my neighborhood, I started earning respect just out of that. More kids started wanting to associate with me, and I started directing them to the gym. And then, when I finished high school, the same coaches that were at the gym used to go to Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya, where this same company has a college, Railway Training Institute. So many of the boxers from the gym in Kisumu would go camping there whenever, there was training for the Olympics or training for any competitions. So they knew the people who are running that college, So the same week that I finished my high school exam, there was an advertisement that there is positions at that college. And so I took the newspaper cutting to these coaches and asked them, "Can you introduce me to somebody? I just finished my exam today." Because I was avoiding I was trying to find a way to get out of, of the slum. I just wanted to see what is it that is possible outside that I can learn and come and improve our condition.
And bring it back.
Yes. Because I had learned from a young age, I had learned that for change to happen, there has to be trade, there has to be relationships. I learned how to take bread from one place, distribute it to other people, and so how small businesses were I just became very driven by the relationship building, the movement of things between people, and how people can help themselves, And
you studied business in college?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. But
I bet you could have taught, given the business experience you went into college with.
Right.
But I'm sure that learning the basics of business, given what your experiences were, just expanded you in incredible ways.
Yes, it did. And, I've never finished my schooling actually, because of, I didn't graduate when I was going to school in Kenya. The scholarship was for, a year and a half. And after that, I could not afford it,
I see.
So while I was in Nairobi is also how I got hooked into DJing. That's where I, over the weekends, I was going to clubs and connecting with DJs and getting music from Nairobi and going to Kisumu and distributing it there, So that's how I started making money, but also connecting with the music industry in Kenya,
Well, I know the nightlife in Nairobi is hot.
Yes.
I've been there and enjoyed that. So I just have so many questions and we could talk forever, but I want to move a little bit to the kind of next phase of your maturation where you then started to work for an NGO. And I want to ask you, how many languages do you speak? 6?
Fluently, 6 I can communicate in, but fluently I can write and communicate in Luo and Kiswahili and English. So 3.
So you became a medical interpreter, right?
That's right.
See, I've been all in your business.
I see that. Yeah, I was a medical interpreter for like 3 years, the first 3 years here in the US.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about how, I know you became a DJ, you left Kuma and went to Nairobi, and I'm sure that expanded your world
extremely,
a great deal.
Extremely.
Because Nairobi is, like I said, I've only been there one time, but that one time I found myself just kind of going like this the whole time because things are moving so quickly.
Yeah.
Everything is moving at this accelerated pace, it feels like, which I had not anticipated would be the case. So now you got into DJing, you're in Nairobi. I'm sorry, I apologize. Somebody is just texting me.
No problem.
One of my children, I'm going to turn my phone off. And how it is that you ended up leaving Nairobi and then taking a job, as I understand it, in Liberia.
Right. So I went back to Kisumu. So after my time in Nairobi ended, and I had a diploma in business administration. So I moved back to Kisumu, and I started helping with managing the orphanage home. When I left Kisumu, the orphanage home was, something that existed, and we were struggling with figuring out. We transitioned from my mother's, distribution business, and all the resources from her business is what she was feeding these kids with. Mm-hmm. So when I came back home from Nairobi, I became one of the managers of that orphanage, just trying to apply the business skills I learned from Nairobi to help sustain the kids. We had like 60 kids living with us on a daily basis.
Wow.
So between 1997 and the early 2000s until 2013, we were feeding about 60 people per day. 60 people stayed there at night, but during the day we had over 100 people,
Wow.
that went to school in our compound that was meant for like maybe 30 people. But so there was a school that, there was a long L-shaped building, semi-permanent building, mud thatched, made out of mud, that my mother had built for renting out for tenants, and so, my first assignment when we received some funding was to break down that building and build the current 3-story building that we have in Kisumu. The other project that I had was to, dig out pit latrines. We had external toilets, dig it out and build modern toilets. The other one was to build, bathrooms and dining room and kitchen and storage. So when I was implementing these projects, I was using the business skills I had learned within the slum and in Nairobi. But I didn't know that there are big NGOs around Africa that are struggling to find people that can do what I was doing. So there was an American guy from Alaska who was working in Afghanistan during the time that Afghanistan was recovering from the war there. He was building schools and, fundraising here in the US and going to build schools in Afghanistan and Nepal. So he met a doctor in Alaska that, told him about the orphanage that was in Kisumu. And so he was interested in coming to see the building, the mud thatched building that kids were going to class in and all of that. So when they saw that is when they said, can you guys, if we gave you the funding, could you build another one? Then we designed it. We did everything, and we agreed that the project will take 2 years to implement. But we used all the connections we had, and by 8 months we were done. And
wow,
when they saw that, they were like, "Can you do this in Malawi? Can you do this in Ghana? Can you do this in Liberia? Can you do this in South Sudan?" And I always say yes to a lot of things. So before I knew it, I was in Nairobi at Norfolk Hotel. Norfolk is like the creme de la creme of hotels in Africa.
I stayed there.
Man,
heavily guarded hotel. I will say that too.
Wow. So before I knew it, I was there with the vice president of South Sudan, with the South Sudanese ambassador to Kenya, and the next day I was flying to Sudan.
Wow.
And I would say that sometimes when you do work and you don't know why you're doing it, but you're just so committed to it that you want to see it through. Other people that thought that, we're just helping poor Africans. Then they see the type of drive you have. They're like, I want this guy on my team, or I want to be a part of his community. So I ended up, working, in Malawi. In Malawi, we built fish farms, the second largest fish hatchery, where we were producing fingerlings that were distributed throughout the country to revitalize Lake Malawi. Lake Malawi had been overfished because the Gates Foundation and other organizations were giving people money for mosquito nets.
Yes.
And then these mosquito nets were being used to fish, and they're not good for fishing because they capture even small, tiny fishes. So the lake is not revitalized.
Yeah.
In Liberia, I was working directly with the president of Liberia, who was the first lady or woman to be a president in Africa. And I was leading the effort to rehabilitate a prison that she had been kept during the war, to change it into a vocational school that teaches people agriculture and masonry, carpentry. So I took people from Kenya, like I took an agriculture expert from Kenya, traveled with him to Liberia, traveled with him to this village, stayed with him there for like 6 months. And, in Ghana, we built the first HIV clinic. There had never been any hospital or facility just for HIV people. I helped design and implement it. And that's how my wife and I actually met,
Well, I was going to say, that's why I brought this whole thing up about you getting to Liberia. Because now your story is so fascinating, and it's one of the reasons why I really did want to have that conversation with you, so we could get to know a little bit more about who Simon is and how Simon became the Simon we know. But that leads right to you becoming an African father in America, because that is where you met your wife, Rebecca, correct? In Liberia.
Right.
And then you all moved to Seattle. She is from this area.
Yes.
And so that's how we got so lucky to get you here in America. And I think that's not an uncommon story. I have quite a few African friends here in this area whose love is what brought them to the States. So now, transitioning from the kind of life that you experienced growing up and then coming to America and then becoming a father in America, one of the questions that I want to ask you about being an African father in America has to do with your training to protect yourself and protect your sisters, and how that has shaped the way that you see your role as protecting your daughters. You have 3 daughters, 3 beautiful daughters. They're very close to their dad. And I've had the opportunity to experience that. closeness and witnessed that. So I'm sure you're protective of them. But what are some of the things that you're most concerned about, I suppose, being a dad of 3 girls, and how you need to protect them? And what are the things you're concerned about?
Yeah, that's a
in
really
the
good
area
question.
of them being protected in general. Yeah,
that's a good question. For me, I grew up in a place where physical harm, was very eminent, so that's why I was saying my sister, her name is Anne, but she became a Muslim, so she changed her name. She was gang raped, and it was a very, very difficult experience for my family. And so I worry about that, for my daughters and for women, because I experienced someone that I loved, physically being harmed,
Yeah.
So that's one of my biggest fears. And this world is very brutal. And I think living in America, I'm realizing that my daughters are, in Kenya, we would call them softy, like they're soft. They have no idea what's going on out there. And even many, many women and many people growing up here in Seattle, in America, they see brutality that happens for us as Black people.
From a distance.
From a distance.
Yeah.
They don't live it. They don't live it where, as a teenager, sometime we would be called to go and beat up a neighbor that beats his wife daily. So it's violence for violence,
Yeah, right.
And it was just brutal. And, women ended up being victims because at night it's just the time for gangs and evil people to reign. And sometime you went to work and you left work late, it's not your fault, then the person you interact with is a rapist. Sure. And that happened to many, many women. And while I'm lucky that I'm raising my girls here in America, the world is now very global, and also rapists are also global, they're everywhere,
Right.
And even here in America, I don't know what the data show, but even family members can be harmful to women, girls especially. So even when my kids interact with relatives here, the standards that other people raise their kids with is not the same standards that I raise my kids with. The respect that I want my kids to give you is not the same respect that somebody else's kids are going to give you. And so when my kids are with them, I just want to help my kids understand that this world is very brutal and they have to physically be able to protect themselves and sense an environment that they need to go away from. I want them to also know that being afraid, being a coward is actually sometimes a good thing, because if you can run away from trouble, then you can live longer, Even though I was a boxer, I ran away from very many situations, but I still trained myself to be physically able to protect myself.
Yeah, I was thinking about this too, Simon, in the context of the fact that there are still some girls missing from Kenya who were abducted. There were over 200 girls were taken in Nigeria. But weren't there some girls taken also in Kenya?
In Kenya, it's not even reported. In Kenya, rape and, when Madaraka, the virtual Madaraka festival happened, there's an artist that performed who had been raped a few years ago by Kenya rugby players, national players of the rugby team. And It was a big deal in the news. But she was just one of the few that came out and talk about it.
And I guess, like you said, we see brutality from a distance, but we're very aware of the vulnerability and the increasing vulnerability of Black bodies. And it used to be just, there was a lot of concern for the bodies of Black men. Now we're coming to understand that there is a legacy of violence against Black female bodies as well.
Right.
So, I just wonder how, as a dad, you balance that. How do you teach your kids to be the best people they can be, but to still protect themselves and to still be aware of everything that's going on around them?
Yeah. I think the first thing I do is to, involve them in the community that I'm a part of. The community I'm a part of is not necessarily the community that I live within physically, but the people that I interact with, And also I'm very direct with them when it comes to educational moments or, moment of learning, I tend to, for example, yesterday I was having a very rough day with my second born. Her name is Atieno. She's 3 years old. And she's very principled. If she says, I'll not eat this banana, even if you kill her, she will not eat that banana. So yesterday we got to a place where I was sending her to her room a lot, and I was getting angry, because she was not behaving properly. So I sat with her on the carpet. I like to level up with her so that she knows I'm not trying to look down upon her and make her feel like she's the worst human being in the world. So I was telling her, if you're behaving like this in Kenya or in Kisumu right now, I would have spanked you. You would have been spanked. Even if I was not your daddy, somebody else would have spanked you seriously because you've gone too far, Then she said, really, I got her attention, Then I started explaining the things she had done from the day before, Then she realized, oh, I'm sorry, So I want them to know how bad things can get when you do certain things. And also to let them know that because of the privilege of living in America, discipline comes in a different way here. But let's say suddenly there is an earthquake and people are fighting over everything. Do you think you'll be misbehaving within that context this way? No. So just to, while I'm loving, I want to give them reality check from time to time. But also, this type of reality checks as they grow up goes further into, sharing with them stories of things like that happen. For example, I listen to reggae music a lot with them. And I use reggae music to teach them. For example, I'm teaching them about death, because I know one day I'll die. When we listen to Bob Marley, I teach them that Bob Marley died, and then we listen to Ziggy Marley. I teach them that Ziggy Marley is alive. Ziggy Marley has children. So when we listen to Peter Tosh, I teach them how Peter Tosh was shot. So we talk about shooting by the gun when George Floyd was killed. We talked about that. When Ahmaud Arbery was killed, I go running a lot. We talked about how that has impacted me personally, So while they're young, I deepen my conversations with them because I know I will not be there for them forever,
Yeah. And that's an interesting thing though, when you were talking about explaining to your daughter that if she was behaving in the way that she was behaving with you, if you were in Kisumu, it would be a different outcome. And I think that's a question that I have around balancing cultures and traditions that you are accustomed to, and how you incorporate those cultures and traditions into this American environment as a dad raising children who are half African, at least, right?
Yeah.
So you just explain how you do that. I think leveling down, I think is a really, really interesting technique, or just a way of being human with your children.
Yeah.
But also instilling this sense of authority and discipline.
Right.
Are there other cultures and traditions that you bring into your fathering with your children? I know you teach, they know how to speak more than one language.
Right, Luo and Kiswahili, yeah. The other thing I would say also around discipline, because one thing I learned is that discipline in life is so important. It's not just about behavior, but it also affects your determination, your drive, how you pursue opportunities, how you connect with people. And I feel like that type of discipline has helped me to even stay healthy here, to stay sane. You know, sometimes because I'm a man, and I'm a people person. I love being with people, you know. But one of the biggest cultural things that I had to adjust to is men in my community do not raise their children. Many men in the African culture, or where I grew up, children being raised, the diapers being changed, all that is for women. You know, men are like movie goers, you know, they watch from a distance. But now there are few that are starting to have a heart and be helpful, you know. And there are also others that lost their wives and circumstances forced them. Maybe they were in cities and such situations, so circumstances have forced them to step up, you know. But I chose. I had an option to look for another job after I left my previous job. An option to look for another job and pay somebody else to take care of our kids, or to be the full-time dad and run One Vibe and hustle on the side to contribute to my share of the bills, you know. And you know, when I made that decision, I was not thinking. I just felt that I don't know my kids, you know. I just felt like, who are these little people, you know? And and then I felt like I don't know myself. You know, when I was leaving my job, one of the realizations is that for 5 years, I invested my emotions. You know, when I do things, I put passion into them. That's why without a 4-year degree or a master's or a doctorate, I worked in 6 African countries and did things that many people cannot do. So when I joined this logistics company that I left in May last year, I was in the mail room, you know, distributing mail to everybody in 2 buildings in Seattle. And that was the least respected job in that organization. But I made it look like the coolest job, because, you know, I dressed nicely, clean, and when I learned people quickly, similar to how I was learning all these business people in the slum in Manyata. When I came to this organization, I learned even little details. There's a marketing director in the organization that liked her envelopes to be, you know, left at the top of the table, you know, vertically, you know, so that she can read it from her chair, you know. And so every time I put it in a different way, she would be a little unhappy. But when I figured that that's how she prefers it and started doing that, we became friends. So then I used that and started studying people and understanding exactly what they needed and doing it. But also I started introducing One Vibe to people. Within like the first minute I meet you, I'm like, my name is so-and-so. And you know, I'm excited about working here, but I also run this organization that does this in Seattle and does that in Kenya. So a lot of the leaders drew interest in me, you know.
Well, it's interesting, you know, when I talk about cultures and traditions, though, that is another example of your African culture and what it taught you, and how you were able to translate that
Right.
to your benefit
Right.
in a American environment
Right.
that is less relational
Right.
and more transactional.
Right.
So fascinating. I want to talk just really briefly about, as you were bringing up the incidences with Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and the countless other deaths that we've witnessed via social media or the news of Black people, not just Black men. And I'll say Sandra Bland and Breonna Taylor and countless others. And this notion that we have now started to explore around the damage that's being done by the culture of white supremacy, and how white supremacy is in many ways an extension of colonialism, and how these two things, on the continent of Africa exist here,
Right.
just in different ways. I just want to get your response and feeling about how those two things coexist on these two continents.
Yeah, I think it's exactly the same thing. They're not even two different things. I think the bottom line, from my perspective, is profits.
Capitalism.
It's capitalism. It's
Mhm.
because in Africa, colonization happened because the European countries, when they met, I think in the late 1800s, they met for months. Actually, I can even pull this information here. I have the exact date. Can I pull it real quick?
Sure.
I want to reference this real quick because it's just it was in 1884 to 1885, to February 1885, and France, Germany, Belgium, all these countries that are mighty now, they met for from December to February to decide how they are going to subdivide Africa, without consulting Africans. And they were going to subdivide it in order for them to get land where they could mine minerals, land where they could, plant tea and coffee, land that they could grow crops that would feed people in Europe, So you find that was profit driven. If you look at slavery here in America, it was also profit driven. I learned that what really spiked slavery in America was the cotton business. When, in fact, the first capital that was pumped into the cotton business in the US was because slaves were a valuable commodity. So the owners of the cotton farms, if they wanted to acquire loans from the English banks, they had to have a certain number of slaves that then would be the security for the loans they received. So then, as cotton became high in demand, slavery also became high in demand for labor and also for raising the money for running the cotton business. So you find that England and Europe are in the middle of these two things. You
Right.
find that,
Right.
capital for slavery came from England, but also for me, if you go back to Kenya's case specifically, you find that the British colonized Kenya, and right now most of the coffee we drink are in Starbucks.
In Starbucks, you're right.
And
right.
if you look at the conditions of the farmers there, they're poor, then
Yeah,
you look,
these are the conversations I love having with my African brothers and sisters, because we share not just the lineage of our African blood, but we also share the resilience of existing, continuing to exist and thrive in these environments where our land has been stripped away from us and we've been stripped away from our land, right? And commoditized, I think is the right word, into producing what has become affluence for others that we often do not share. But we're still connected.
We are. And you know what's interesting is when slavery happened, it took away some of the most intelligent people in Africa, the strongest people. So it took the best of Africa at the time. Then colonization came and did the same thing.
Yeah.
And so you find that even though we are scattered globally, you know, because slavery took Africans to different parts of the world, you know, we are in India, the Middle East, here in America,
Brazil, all over.
But we are still surviving, we are still thriving, and I think that is the most amazing thing to hear, you know. And I've also been like researching and also going back and talking to, you know, recently I got looped into a conversation with a spiritual movement, an African spiritual movement that is led by a woman who is a prophet that does not speak any English, but she has met so many world leaders because of the powers that she has. And her belief is, you know, the revival of the African spirituality, because she's saying the reason why black men are suffering globally is because, you know, you find that every race has a religious grounding and a purpose for everybody to always go back home at least once a year. But Africans do not have a religious connection to Africa. So a lot of us don't even want to identify as Africa. Indians have the Hinduism, you know, Arabs have Islam. The English have the Catholic, they have Protestant, they have all these churches, you know. Anyhow, so it was, for me, it's interesting, and I'm only digging deep into these topics because I live in the diaspora. When I lived in Kenya, I was completely brainwashed. And I started digging more, and I started seeing the suffering of, you know, black people here, and also just questioning, who am I? You know, what space do I belong to? You know, I began realizing that we are in trouble. We're in big trouble. And so the African Father in America podcast, for me, it's a response and a platform that can allow us to have genuine conversations, you know, without fear, you know.
But I think we have less grounding in who we are when we are not connected to others who are like us. And I think that what you're doing and creating this platform for these authentic conversations for folks to connect with one another and share their stories and get some encouragement is incredibly important. And it reminds us that Africans can be anywhere in the world, but we are still a part of the same family.
We are still Africans.
Yeah, we are still African.
Yeah, Peter Tosh had a song that said that.
Yeah.
You know, no matter where you are in the world, you're African. I'm referring to a lot of reggae artists, and it just says how much I listen to reggae. But today I was talking to a Jamaican who owns a tech company in Florida, and he was saying, you know, there are so many reggae artists we know in Jamaica that sing about Africa, that when, for example, when Nelson Mandela was in jail, they sang for 27 years until Nelson Mandela was released. And these are songs that we can listen to until today. And so I was telling her that if it was not for reggae music and boxing, I would have been in jail or dead. And then he said, wow, you know, what you said made me think of all these reggae artists that I know in Jamaica that have always believed in Africa. They've always sang about Africa. And I didn't know that their music helped people just like you described it.
Yeah.
You know, like literally. And so when there are African people elsewhere away from Africa that think of Africa, sing about Africa, it's actually inspiring African people in Africa.
Right.
It's exactly the same thing with hip hop,
Well, I tell you, some of my favorite artists right now are African artists. Just because I think one of the things that I love most about the continent of Africa and the people on the continent of Africa is how bright and intelligent they are and how much they know about us. Mm-hmm. And that is a heart expanding experience to be in Africa and to know that people know about your experience as an African American, right? And having grown up, I grew up in an era where I was taught essentially that Africans wanted nothing to do with Black people, right? Because we were, it was all of the propaganda and all of the brainwashing. But once I really learned that was not the truth, and my first visit to Africa, when I got to Ghana, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to hear this wonderful drumming music. And the first music I heard was rhythm and blues. And I kept going, huh? What? That's what they're playing here? But that's, again, that just, it proves a point that we are connected. We do care about one another, no matter where we are in the diaspora. So I guess I think it would be great to hear from you if you have any tips that are kind of the conclusion to our conversation around surviving as an African father in America.
Yeah. Thank you, Vivian. First, I just want to say that to survive, to be able to thrive, is first to realize that you're breathing, to be aware of yourself, So,
self-awareness. I love that. It's
so important, and I didn't know how powerful it is until I began being a full-time father, When you are under somebody's command, when you are an employee, even if you are sick, you have to tell somebody, you're a slave to a certain extent,
Wow.
But being able to look back, I realized how I was a dog on a leash, on someone's command. They can send you to any department at any time, But now I realize that I'm more aware of myself, and I can choose what meeting to attend and what not to do. And I can choose that this whole week I just want to be with my daughters. No meeting. I work when I want. I work out more than I work, I take time to think and not do, because I realize that thinking and not really meditating, but thinking about what you want to do, allows you to do it even well, but we are never allowed to do that. And we are so powerful beings that we are underutilizing our potential because of relying on other people. So my biggest other tip I would give anyone listening is to have a sense of independence, that is physically, financially, and also mentally, have the ability to support yourself physically, be able to run even for 2 miles per week, and have little things that you do to make yourself to be happy about yourself, and make them smaller goals. I'll give you an example of yesterday. I put this bar in the laundry room where I have to, if I go to the laundry room, I do pull-ups. So I avoid going to the laundry room if I don't want to do pull-ups, So just little discipline I put around my lifestyle that allows me to be physically fit, whether it's winter or summer, Then what you eat, what you eat is so important, and it determines how you function. A car that uses diesel does not function like the airplane that uses jet fuel, or a car that uses gasoline. So if you want to function like a car using diesel, then you have to drink diesel. If you want to function like a car that uses regular premier gasoline, then you have to function like that. So just you have the power to choose what goes in your mouth, and you also have the power to choose how you spend your time and who you spend it with, So these few things, if you think about them more, they might be helpful.
I love the concept of getting to know yourself by spending time with your children, because that really is an extension of who you are.
Oh yeah, it has helped me a lot. Like sometimes I'm with them, I'm so frustrated, then I say, I can't talk to you because you won't understand what I'm saying. I can't call my wife, she's at work, she won't understand this exact situation. I can't call my mom. I'll do push-ups and some sit-ups and just wait for you to figure out that I'm frustrated and talk to me. If you don't talk to me, I'll just lay down here and think about what to do, Then they end up coming and sitting on you. Then they start playing. They forgot that they hurt your feelings, that they've not been listening since morning. Then you realize how much control you don't have,
But you also have and I think you were saying this in some ways when you talked about controlling what you put in your mouth. You have this connection to the earth.
Oh yeah.
That's really, really important.
It's so important. I didn't realize how I valued it and how important it is to me. But it's something that my mom has too,
Mm-hmm.
When my mom takes her time to farm the land, she feeds people, and that's part of how she used to feed kids at the orphanage. And so this summer, even when we lived in Renton, I had a garden, I always had a garden. But this summer I took it seriously, and the pandemic also contributed to it because we were here. So along the fence, from the inside of our compound, all the way, there is something growing.
I saw. It's beautiful.
For the last 3 months, we've been eating primarily from our own garden.
Wow.
And now, we have carrots, we have squash, I'm giving neighbors things, and I'm inviting friends and sharing with them some of this stuff. And I'm just realizing that this is something that everybody can do, and I'm involved with organizations here in Seattle that is also partly helping people realize that everybody can garden, I'm involved with Black Farmers Collective and Yes Farm. And we just distributed 35 to go gardens to Kenyans, to 35 Kenyan families actually, so this is African Americans helping Kenyans, by the way.
I love it.
Then I'm involved with creating the Wanawari teaching garden. I was involved from the beginning, and I'm still steering it and contributing to it. I was involved also as an advisor to the Common Acre. But outside of that, I started Meeting Idawa, which is an initiative to help protect Lake Victoria and to plant more trees around that region. At a personal level, I've planted over 10,000 trees since 2009,
That's fantastic.
And this is just from money that I've, from my own money. But now we are scaling this passion so that we can also begin, engaging with the climate change conversation, because many Africans or African Americans don't even know about climate change issues, and this is something going to affect every human being. It's already affecting every human being on Earth, but I feel like our people need to be more involved with it. And in Kenya especially, in Africa especially, because we have a whole continent that contributes a lot to the global ecosystem. And we don't want white people to go there and tell us how to do this big thing this time. We've always been told this is how you have to do this is how you have to do that. But
we've seen what that has gotten us. It has not gotten us very far. But I think that Europeans are coming down on the rung of threat to Africa and China and Korea, South Korea, other places in Asia are now starting to find Africa to be a really ripe environment for a different kind of colonial settlements there. So we have to keep our eyes open. Keep our eyes. Well, I think what you shared too, Simon, is one of my takeaways is that even being an African in America does not mean that you cannot bring all of your African-ness to your American lifestyle.
You have to
do it.
Yeah, you see these instruments behind me. These are traditional music instruments. It's called nyatiti. And if you are in Kenya, you can't find young men like me playing it. You find elders, or if it's young men, they learned it from their grandfather or somebody. And I picked it up through the work I do with One Vibe, we used to bring elders there to teach kids how to play it, how to make it from scratch. And that is how I learned how to do it. And now I'm playing it and I'm releasing 3 songs from this music. And I'm teaching my kids how to play it, how to sing in that language. So we just have to, it's a war. When it comes to preserving our culture, we have to know it's a war. We have to speak it daily. We have to practice it daily. It has to be a devotion. That's when we can see results,
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a perfect ending for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And to all the listeners of the African Father in America podcast, this was a really, really special, time with my dear Vivian Philips. And I just want you all to make sure you subscribe to the African Father in America podcast on iTunes, and make sure you rate us over there. And when you go to YouTube, leave a comment when you watch this video. And thank you again for all the support you continue giving me and this amazing podcast. With that, I just want to wish you all a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you so much, Vivian.
African Father in America. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. African Father in